good show, everybody.
Thanks.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Book Covers by GoIndieNow. Let me just show I want to show the shirt. I have a shirt. Today we're going to be talking about book covers, and we have a nice panel discussion here, a very full panel discussion, and we're going to be discussing the ins and outs of book covers and whether or not you need a professional made one or whether or not you should actually get your own skills up and make your own book cover and see what people think. We'll go ahead and start with introductions, and we'll start from my panel here, what I see from the left, which is Heidi. Go ahead. Introduce yourself, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Heidi Angel, and I am the author of the Hunters series, the Clear Angel Chronicles, and the Hell School series.
Then we have Joshua.
Hey everyone, this is Joshua Robertson. I am the best-selling author of Melcorca and the owner of Crimson Edge Press. Great to be here tonight.
Great. Now we have Mike.
G'day everyone, my name's Michael J. Elliott. I'm the author of Portraits of Dread and Sharpshooter, and I'm also a book illustrator for a series of adventures by author Claire Playstead.
Thank you very much. And now we have Rebecca. Rebecca, you have to unmic your mic.
Yep. There we
There you
go. Hey, I'm Rebecca Jonesy, and I can't work the mouse button. Yay! I write romance and sometimes erotica, mostly romance. I put out over a dozen books at this point. Not going to list them all.
All right, then we have Timothy.
I'm Timothy Bateson, author of Under a Hunter's Moon short story, which was released back in June, and contributing author to several short story anthologies. And it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you all for being here. My name is Jin Okubo. I am the author of Love. I'm also the author of Kaoru in Love's Shadow. I'm also a fantasy author with Memories and Brotherhood, and the next one coming out, once I get Brotherhood out, it will be Cold Love. Everyone, I'm going to start this off and start the ball rolling with a very important question that always lingers on indie authors because money is so tight. Whether or not we should go professional or whether or not we should go with our own personal attempts at making a book cover. What do you think?
Depends on your skill set.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'm definitely not the kind of person who should be doing their own covers. I found out from experience that I don't have the design skills necessarily.
Yeah,
I
I
think
haven't tend to. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to tend to agree that I've always been a drawer since childhood, but I don't have the graphic skills to actually do something that looks really, really professional. Now, so I think really, I know money's tight, but if you can get someone to do those for you, and at the same time try and get your own skills up and running, and yeah, that can be a big help.
It's definitely a challenge, I think, in a modern market to be able to compete with covers that are done professionally, done when you're doing them by yourself. I think it's important that if you don't have the skill set to really match a graphic design or graphic design artist, to go and get it done professionally. But if you do have the skill set, which I don't, then by all means, I think it's okay to go ahead and explore it yourself. But as we'll get into tonight, Jen, which I'm sure you're aware of, there's a lot of things that go into making covers, which many people who start to make their own covers aren't aware of.
I actually think it probably depends a lot more on the genre of your book. Like sci-fi, fantasy, all of those have, the good ones have really complicated book covers. But for things like a mystery or horror, those can be really simple. And romance, really, really simple.
But even with the simplicity, there's still skill sets that people don't even consider. Like, for example, I'm looking to update my cover for The Hunters, which was the first cover I designed. And I actually designed my own book covers because I went to school for graphic design. I can't draw for anything. And so a lot of times I work with Photoshop. But when I don't have Photoshop images that work, then I have to go and find somebody to do that editing for me. And there are a lot of, like Fiverr, I was just on there looking for illustrators, and there were a bunch of ebook designs. And I was like, how are these people doing ebook covers for $100? Because when you have to pay for extended licensing, which is what you have to have for commercial work, there's no way you can have 3 or 4 people on the front cover and have it be only $100. They're not making any money. And then I got looking at it and I went, oh, they don't know that they have to have extended licensing. And neither does that poor author who just bought that. And if they end up being a whirlwind success like E.L. James, and all of a sudden they're on the front cover, they're the ones that are going to get sued, not their graphic designer. They're the ones who are using those images without permission. And so not knowing that as an author is dangerous, and not knowing that as a designer, because there's lots of people out there hanging up their shingles saying they'll design your book cover for you, but if you don't know the rules and regulations and you can't make sure that they do, you could end up in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, I found this picture on the internet. That means it's free, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's I think that's one of the mindsets that you know, some people have, that, you know, if you see it on Google Images or some other, because it's there, it's free, and that's not the case either. And I know that my graphic designers charge me basically one of the components of that charge is for them to purchase the rights to use that photo or that image.
Okay. Well, money aside, because you can get royalty-free pictures on the internet. You can get royalty-free, free-to-use pictures that are allowed to be used on anything. Some of them have a small watermark that you must include with it. Some of them don't. When you get to the bare bones of it, I've always heard the adage, "You don't judge a book by its cover." And just like you don't date a woman because of her personality, people often judge books by their cover. And for me, it's always been the opposite. When I grew up, I'm a gamer. I played a lot of games, and I still do. And I've always learned, and I learned at a very young age, the best designed games have the worst covers, and the games that come in the prettiest box have the worst special effects. With books, I tend to view it a little bit with a grain of salt. If someone puts so much money into a book cover, I kind of feel that they're trying to hide something else. What do you feel about the book cover that way?
I don't see any correlation.
If the book cover is really designed well, is it masking for some inadequacies, or is it just more than that?
I've seen great books with terrible covers and vice versa. So I've seen great books with great covers. I mean, it all depends.
Yeah, I don't think the book cover necessarily has any indication of the quality of what's inside. That's why Amazon and Smashwords let you do the 20% view inside. But at the same time, when I'm in a bookstore and I'm looking for books, the cover that most appeals to me, which is going to be different for everybody, but those are the covers that draw my attention if I don't know exactly what I'm looking for. And I think that, you know, if you look at the Goodreads forums, most readers say the same thing. Oh, I don't choose a book based on the cover, but the first thing I notice about a book, the first thing that makes me notice a book is the cover.
Well, I would go along with that. I mean, I would say that, of course, you can't judge a book by its cover, but we know in terms of sales and marketing, it's going to be your cover, your blurb, and your first couple of pages that really sell the book. And so the cover definitely has a piece of it on whether or not you're drawn into it. I know there's been covers that I'll pass by that I almost just kind of laugh at and keep moving because they look amateur and they don't look as interesting to me. Where at the other end, I've seen covers that have looked great, and I've read the blurb, I've read the first couple of pages, and I put it back on the shelf because it didn't hold my interest.
I'm going to jump in on this one. I did a blog post back in, I think it was February, based on something from Book in a Box. They said there are 9 criteria people judge books by. book title, recommending source, the cover, book description, blurbs, customer reviews, author bios and pictures, book text itself, and then the price. For something to be as high up as the third thing people look at psychologically when picking books, it's huge. I mean, the comment they've made was, most people are looking for reasons not to buy your book. Try not to give them one with a badly designed cover. And I thought that was a huge revelation when I looked at that, especially with the stats that have been coming through on my own books.
Yeah, I did a marketing degree many years ago, and one of the first things we learned is that you have basically sort of virtually, with your product, you have virtually 10 seconds to grab the person's attention. And books are like any other product. You have to get that interest there. Now, obviously, visually, the covers are meant to do that. But of course, it's got to relate to the genre. It's got to say something about the story. And otherwise, people will feel disappointed. It's like, buying a product based on the packaging, and find it's nothing like what you've bought. So I think the cover helps in that way too, and that's why a lot of the images and so forth have to at the very least, I'd say, have to denote your genre or what you're trying to get across with your story.
Well, let me ask you this question for the panel. So we have the book covers they're the first gateway, and people pay attention to them a lot. But then you get book covers, for example, Dean Koontz, who I like, and his name covers half, if even more, of the front cover.
Because Dean Koontz is what sells. Because his author name is so big. But most authors, they don't have that kind of recognition. And so, that's one of those things that when you do have that recognition, that's a way to go. But until then, if your name is bigger than your title is one of the most important things to catch people's attention, unless you're a big name author.
Absolutely.
All right. Then, so you're sitting there going like, okay, the title's to catch their attention, the book cover's there to catch their attention. All of this is to catch their attention and get them to read that 20% of the book. And hopefully your writing is up to par. Then when you get up there and you're fresh off your book, you got it printed, you got it published, you've already got everything done, and your book cover has been not so well received. When do you decide to go back and have it redone? When do you decide it's been up there for long enough, I should get my cover redone, rather than looking at a different marketing pitch?
I would say as soon as possible, as soon as you can. If you think that's what's holding you back, then go ahead and redo it. Also,
and honestly, go ahead.
Like you were saying, you're redesigning your covers now, right? So
yeah, and mine isn't because I've had a bad reception for the Hunters. Hunters is actually my most popular series.
Mm-hmm.
People enjoy the cover. But when I was getting ready, I'm getting ready to release the second book in the series, and I went back and I looked at what's big in the Vampire Slayer stuff, and this style isn't popular anymore.
And
so I'm updating it to make it fresh to what people are looking for now. And the book's only 3 years old, so
Every couple of years, you're going to have to do it. I've only been publishing for 2 years, and I've already revamped my covers once. So.
I'm going to jump in again. Another thing we want to consider is if you're ever changing your cover artists and everything, you can't always maintain a consistency across covers. So if for whatever reason you have to change a cover artist in the middle of a series, it can sometimes be worth looking at going back and revamping some of your older covers to match, especially if for whatever reason you have to change fonts or whatever, or you suddenly try to rebrand part of that series. It's definitely time to go back and redesign.
I honestly think this is good information, but I think I have a little bit more of a take on it because it's really just not that simple. There's a lot that has to do with having your book cover out there, having people see it, having them be familiar with the image of your book cover, and having that being attached to your name. As we can see with Heidi over there, she's got several books that have been written, so now she has the leisure to go back and redo some of those covers and have it be adjusted to whatever's popular in culture. But if you only have one book that's been written and it's been out there for a little while and it's not selling, and you're just focusing on watching those sales every day and whether or not it's coming in or going out and decide to keep redoing the cover over and over and over to up sales on one book, you really need to stop doing that. I mean, your best bet is to go out there
you
and
need
keep
to look
writing
at what
books.
else is wrong. Yeah.
And build up your backlist. Keep writing. Get more material out there. Build your fan base. Don't just focus on those elements around one book.
Yeah.
Okay,
The easiest way to sell your first book is to write a second.
Right?
or third, fourth, fifth, and keep going as much as you can.
Yeah.
Well, let's switch back now to the cost. And I'm an indie author. I've been broke. I have a full-time job, and my wife has a full-time job, and this is how we maintain our family. Writing doesn't bring in enough income. So that being said, I can't afford, and so all my covers are designed personally. Fortunately have the skill set and the drive to learn even more on how to make my own book cover. Like Heidi mentioned earlier, I do background checks on where I can buy images, and I make sure that I buy them, or if they're not royalty free completely, I make sure I buy them with the rights to be able to use them to sell my book. That being said, other indie authors, they don't have the finances. Some of them are so broke that they can't even put out a paperback book because it'll cost them too much. They can barely afford editing. How can they find a book cover designer who will do the job for them but not charge them their life savings?
Lots and lots and lots of research.
And find an author who designs their own covers that you like and trade services. Maybe you're really good at doing your own self-editing or plot stuff, and and they have a great cover, and they designed their cover, and you want something like that. Say, hey, I'll go and be your beta reader and run through it for you, so you can save that money, and then you can use me to do that. So yeah. That's very helpful.
That's one of the things I did for the cover for Under Hunter's Moon. I got very, very lucky. I was talking to another author online about some notes I had for editing one of her books that she'd sent over to me for an advanced reader copy, and I happened to come up with some notes. And we got talking cover design. And she'd only just started doing her own covers, and she had some ideas of what would be good for mine. And next thing I know, she's got all the royalties and everything locked down for doing a cover design and sent me a full cover for my book. I didn't ask for it, but I got very lucky that I was able to trade services in kind in terms of doing some time editing for her. And I can't imagine how much I saved doing that.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go on. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that everyone's kind of touching on a very clear fact that being an author in today's world requires that you have a number of skill sets. Maybe you can't make covers, maybe you're good at beta reading, maybe you're a good editor, maybe you have other skill sets that you can offer and trade. And the writing community is pretty close-knit. If you can get embedded into a community and start talking to people and making connections like all of us have done over the course of our own authorship, you can really find creative ways to get a good product put together.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I can relate to your description of sort of the penniless author, Jim, because I'm on a disability support pension here in Australia, which sort of just basically covers my living expenses. So anything I have to pay for in terms of writing, such as editing, book cover design, so forth, comes out of any sort of spare money I've got. And when I first started off, I found a wonderful designer, but the cover were costing me, with the exchange rate and so forth, over 300 Australian dollars, which I had to sort of make sure I had no bills and sort of save that money. Then on a funny situation, I was trying to save money. I just brought out a new short story called Black Silk Panties, and I wrote, asking a book writing club, online club, can anyone tell me a program I could use to design it? Someone put their hand up and said, oh, I can do book covers for you, really cheap. I said, no, you don't understand. I have no money whatsoever. Through serendipity, that designer, who is quite reasonable for me, does all my horror covers now, and I have another designer who does my sort of ghosty, sort of not blood and gutsy type covers, because she doesn't like that sort of thing, but she's really a good designer. So there, as you've said, you find these things out. So it's all trial and error. It really is, yeah.
All right, everyone, we just got a question here, which is right in line where we're going here. It's from Andy P. Thank you, Andy P, for asking this question. How much should we expect to pay for a good cover? So give us a nice little range here.
That depends on what's on it. This cover right here is one that I designed. I paid $100 for the extended license on the cover, and that's all it cost me. Another one that I'm looking at, the remodel, I'm looking at $125 for the cover art. So
the level of complexity certainly plays into that.
Go ahead, Timothy. I think I talked over the top of you.
Sorry. I was going to say the level of complexity of the design certainly plays a lot into the pricing, and how many revisions you're going to get with the artist in question. I've seen them go from anything from $50 all the way up to $500 and upwards. It really depends on, again, I would say how much you expect the book to sell, as much as anything else. I don't think you want to pay more than you expect to be able to make back in return.
Something else with that, it also has to do with how patient you are in finding the deals.
I think that goes a lot into it.
Yeah, because there's lots of artists out there that are willing to sell you art. I had a guy who was like, oh, I know you're an indie author, and I'll do the art for you, and it's going to be $500 for this image that you want custom designed, which really, when you think about an artist's time and energy going into that, isn't that bad, but at the same time, for an indie artist, that's $500. I don't even make $1 per book at the prices that I have it, so that's kind of pricey. And he's like, oh, I'll do it, on an extension. And then I went to Fiverr and I found 5 different artists that were willing to do comparable work for $100.
And I think that's a lot that comes down to it. I've seen books anywhere between $80 and $800, and artists, you really just have to go out there and shop, because each of them will charge you something different, and sometimes that $80 cover might be better than the $800 cover. The real question for yourself is, what is affordable to you, and what's your return going to look like? Are you going to sink money into a product and never see the return on it, or at least not see it for several years?
But not just shop. Make sure that you get the proper licensing too.
Yes.
Well, let's extend this a little bit. Let's talk about the low range of the covers and where they're good. You mentioned Fiverr. So how does Fiverr work to be able to get you the best deal for a book cover?
Honestly, from what I saw on there, price-wise, don't get an ebook from Fiverr. But you can get an illustrator, and then you can use CreateSpace. They give you the dimensions, and from getting the cover and looking at what you see on what's selling well in your genre, you can kind of cheat not having a graphic design degree, and you can do your own cover design as long as you've got the art. The art's really the big thing that matters as far as doing graphic design. The rest of it, if you've got a decent eye, you can see, okay, this is a good font for my genre. This is a good placement for my genre. This is the good layout. This is how I should do the side. And CreateSpace has the template that you can get right from them. It's already set up when you plug in your page numbers. So as far as graphic design work goes, that's the easiest part of being an author on that end. It's getting the cover art or the photos that you want to use. That's the hard end.
Yeah, and this is another way of going about getting into communities where you have designers and artists and really talking to them. DeviantArt is a great platform for that. They have artists everywhere, and many of them will offer their art to you for relatively affordable fees. $50, $100, and you can grab their art and then turn it over into a cover.
And some of them will even do it just for name recognition.
Yep.
So it's just a matter of asking.
Another place you want to check out is one of the things I've been looking at for cover design, just getting ideas, looking at the pre-designed covers that are out there. A lot of the cover art companies will actually have a set of pre-designed covers you can go ahead and start buying from them, and then talk to them about modifications you might want to make. And some of it's just a simple font change. Sometimes a slight change of coloration on the background or something. And there are actually some very good covers out there for a very, very reasonable price. And that's one of the ways you can come in at the low end of the market pricing and still get a good cover. It's just you might not get something that's consistent across a series without working.
You also want to be careful with that because there may be other books that have your cover.
Well, that's why you would check they're reputable and they've actually taken the cover off the market as soon as you buy it.
Yeah, you do want to be careful with that, though, for sure.
Yeah, I'd agree with Tim that is a good way to get a sort of not low but sort of reasonably priced cover, and as he said, make sure that once it's sold, it's not available anywhere else. And what you said about trying with CreateSpace too, I think is a really good option because it helps you build up your confidence in your design skills as an author too, which we all need. Also too, I myself found an online course that teaches you book cover design using Canva. Now, I don't intend to use any of that to make a cover for myself, but it's bringing up my skills. So I think you can, there's a lot of options like that you can try too to build up your skill set while you're looking for a decent cover.
All right.
Absolutely. And programs like GIMP have tons of free tutorials that teach you how to do that stuff. Absolutely.
All right. Just a real quick show of hands. Who has a good relationship with their designer? Like you're on an email basis. All right. So the reason why I'm asking is because we have a question from Jason G, and this is through Twitter. Thank you, Jason. He's asking, how do you go about establishing a good working relationship with a designer? Some design websites let you make maybe 2 or 3 revisions depending on how much you pay. How much can be demanded by the author that is reasonable?
I don't know if it's really fair for me to answer this. I mean, I of course own Crimson Edge, which is a small press, and so I've worked alongside our designer for 3 years now, and I'm kind of on the inside. And we do traditional publishing. Our authors don't pay for everything. We take care of everything on our end. So.
And I think, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's fine. Ladies first, John.
I think one of the things that you'll find with illustrators, the more clear you can be with what you want up front, the less revisions you'll have to have. The less revisions you have, the less they don't like you. So that makes a huge difference. There's nothing more frustrating than you saying, oh, well, I want a woman on the front cover sitting next to a wolf with a moon in the background, and so they draw this beautiful woman who ends up looking kind of Asian or Native American, and then they've got this beautiful wolf, and what you really meant was you wanted an African American female, and the wolf was actually a werewolf, and it's supposed to be her shifting into the werewolf. That's a totally different book cover. But they don't know. And I've had authors that say, oh, well, if they just read my book, they'd see my vision. They don't get paid enough to read your book. I'm sorry, if Kirkus is asking for $300 to read your book, you're asking your cover artist to read your book and come up with your creative design all for $50? No, that's just crazy. You wouldn't do that, so why would you ask that of them? So putting yourself in their shoes as much as possible and relating to them, and then, make their job as easy as possible, especially if they're giving you a good deal.
Yeah, I was just going to say, there's a theory, and it's known as level of perception. Now, the way we all see things, hear things, relate to things is our own unique perspective. Now, you might see a movie think it's wonderful. I think it's rubbish. That doesn't mean your perspective wrong, my perspective wrong. It's just different things affect our perspective. Now, if you think that you're being crystal clear with your designer by saying, as you just pointed out, and then finding, and they're going, well, I thought I was doing it right. No, I'm the author. I know what I want. No, you're going to be at crosshairs. You're going to start off your relationship with your designer really on tenterhooks, and they're going to be a little bit iffy about, sort of perhaps revision and things like that. So I would suggest very much being crystal clear, saying if you want a person on the cover, describe that person. Say if it's African American female, say if it's Asian, say if it's male, whatever. So there's no confusion. One of the things I do, because I draw, is I draw the image I want in pen. I draw the type of font I want, and I put little arrows on this drawing and tell my designer, this is a graffiti style font I want. This person's in a straight jacket with gaunt face. That all helps, and that my designer can then go and look straight away for images because they know that's what I want. So that's a big help too. Not saying draw it if you can't, have a go, but at least write down your description for them. I think that's a big help.
And sometimes even giving them photographic references helps too, because if you say, oh, it's a Native American, there's lots of different tribes and they all look very different. I'll send them a photo of an actor and I'll say, look, this is kind of how I want him to look, a little leaner or deeper eyes or slightly different hair color. But give them a visual, because they're visually creative. They're not necessarily verbally creative. That's our job. That's why a lot of times we struggle with covers, because it's different skill sets. So trying to work with their skill sets is really important too.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think it comes back to something we always say in the writing industry: show, don't tell. If you can give them an example of what you're looking at, give them a clear image of what you have in your mind, the clearer you can be, especially if you can give them a reference point, then the clearer the results you're going to get back are going to be, and the less, and like you say, the less revisions are going to be required.
Well, we've had a couple of people that are through this comment right now. It's been a little bit quiet. Rebecca, you mentioned that you write some romance, and you've had 12 books or out there. So in your book covers, they're all designed individually by different designers, or you go back to the same person?
I go back to the same person because I design all of my own. I have done every one of my own book covers.
Which is what one of the things that's going on to the next part here. How did you do that? How did you decide on what best made a book cover for you?
Okay, first I wrote the book, and then I picked the genre. Once again, I write romance, and there's several different genres of romance. So I broke it all the way down, and then go to Amazon bestseller. Look at the top 20 bestsellers. Use that as a template. And there's always going to be like 2 striking different kinds of templates for those covers. It doesn't matter which genre you're in. That's how it always ends up. So I picked the one that's the easiest for me to do. Yeah, I'm going to make sure it looks good, but I'll follow that template. When I first got started self-publishing, I did a ton of research on this. I took classes. I really boned up on it for about a year or so before I really got started, and I found a deal. I think it was on a stock photo site. You get a membership and you're allowed to download 3 or 5 stock photos a day. Well, I kept that membership for 2 months for $10 a month and downloaded 3 a day, as many as I could a day, and I have been working off that stockpile ever since. I got tons of different photos, so I go back in and I take not the whole picture. I'll shrink it down because someone's going to use that picture. I don't have, exclusive rights to it. So I don't want my cover looking like somebody else's cover. So, I'll cut sections out of it. I'll use, it's a picture of the guy completely. I'll just do his chest or, half his face and his shoulder. But that's how I do it every time, and then I match fonts with what's popular too, and go from there, and then just try and make it stand out. Always, always, always make the title stand out, because that's what people see.
Okay, so and you have a great working relationship with the designer because you are the designer. And if you've made a mistake, you can go there and fix it. So
Oh
the
yeah, I
question
mean,
for
sometimes we get in fights.
yeah,
Sometimes there's a lot of yelling.
and that's where the question comes to mind, which is for people who've paid for a book cover and you've paid for it, and the designer goes, okay, great, 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 and you do revision one, and they give you 2, 3 revisions, and you say, well, this is a revision, and you keep getting back and back and back, and you've given them all the data, you've given them picture samples, you've given them as much description, you've shown them what you want, and then you get the last book cover and you go, okay, the contract's done, you get the book cover in the mail, and it's not what you ordered. What do you do?
I think in
never
those
had
Have a
instances,
review.
we're all talking.
Can anyone else answer?
Yeah. So Rebecca can fix her own stuff because she's doing her own covers, but everyone else, you're dealing with a book cover designer, and that's what you're stuck with.
I may speak on behalf of the book cover designer because it's got to be very clear in the contract about what that revision process looks like and where the limits are at, because they have other work that's coming in as well, and other things that they have to be responsible for, and that's also their bread and butter and what it is that they're doing. So I think that in any case, as you run across those problems, it's got to be clearly written in the contract about how many times you're going to go back, what the restrictions are, and what level of effort they're going to put into it.
Another thing is, if you as an author do your research, you shouldn't have that problem, because you can tell by the work that they've done for others, the quality of their work and the style, and if it's not a good match, then that's not the company for you to use, no matter how cheap it is.
See,
And if you...
Well, let me cut you off right there real quick, Heidi, and I'll let you continue. A burgeoning author, one that's barely coming out right, they've written their book, they've gone through and they paid all this money for editing, and they think they've done the research, but now they're stuck. See, that's the person that we're trying to help right now. If you're seasoned with a couple of
do more research. I mean, I've been publishing for 6 years now, and yeah, you're gonna have some times where you're gonna spend money on stuff and go, oh, that was a waste of money. I did Comic-Con 2 years in a row before I realized that was a waste of money, but that's just a part of being an entrepreneur, and it's in any industry. Anytime you're doing something new and different, it takes time to learn it, and that's on you. And there's only so much studying you can do before you just have to pull on your big boy pants, get out there and take a ride, and sometimes you're going to get knocked off the horse, and you just count it as a learning experience. This is what I learned from this. This is how I can make this better next time. And it's tough, especially working on tight budgets, but it's the life that all of us live, And just when you think you've done enough research, do 10 more days of research, just to be sure. Okay, that's just my neurotic rule. You don't have to follow that.
I was just going to add that, look, if you look at it in context, now, as consumers, we've all made a bad purchasing decision at some stage. We've all bought something or, paid for a service and then found out it maybe wasn't exactly what we want. And as was just pointed out, it's all learning. You think, okay, I learned that I should have been perhaps more upfront, I should have said more, the designer should have told me more. It's a two-way thing. So if that happens to you, and I pray that it doesn't happen to anyone, move on. As was just mentioned, move on. It's a learning curve.
Is there, and I know there is for editing, where if you find that someone's a predatory editor, and they're just going in and taking money from people, taking advantage from them. And this happened to me, by the way. And originally I didn't want to report that person because I just wanted to move on past it. But another person said no, report it, and I went to, I guess, the predatory editing reporting website, and I typed in their email, and that was the end of it. I never got the money back, by the way. Is there a way to report designers who are predatory towards the new authors?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every site, DeviantArt has, you can write reviews. Two, with Fiverr, you don't have to make the payment until you get the final product that you want. And you can dispute it if it's not what they said that they would offer. And with anywhere that you find it, that everybody has some sort of a review/reporting process. So it's just a matter of making sure you track that down. And then, of course, if their business is based out of the U.S., report them to the Better Business Bureau.
All right, so let's change the topic real quick here to designing your own book cover. What are the steps, if you've done it or if you've tried it? I've designed my own book covers just because I prefer to have my thumb in the pie. And yeah, it's a very steep learning curve, but if you pick it up, it'll actually help a lot. Let's take this in steps and go. First of all, what goes into deciding what's going to be in your book cover, and follow that up through to designing a full cover, and then what software would be better for a beginner to use. So let's start off with what goes into a book cover design.
Well, if we're talking about things like fonts and images and those types of things, I know that Heidi started on this already earlier, but you want to have a large title on the front of your book. It's typically good to stick with only 2 fonts, no max more than 2 fonts on there, and they got to be pretty clear. You don't want to do things like Comic Sans and things along those lines. There's a lot of piece that comes into it in terms of what the back blurb looks like and how the color fits together, and not using gradients. The idea that I always think about is that you have billboards where you have motorists flying by at 70 miles per hour. So billboards generally have a pretty clear image, 5 to 11 words, and that's it. And you want the exact same type of mentality when you're making your book cover, that people are going to be flying by it pretty quickly, and you want something to snag their interest. There's a lot of arguments online about how symmetrical or asymmetrical you want the book cover to be. I usually say you want about 99% symmetry, and then you want one thing just slightly helter-skelter to draw people in to pick up the cover and look at it a bit closer.
I think Rebecca made a good point earlier, is that the first step you want to do is go and look at what's hot in your genre right now. Because I was just doing editing for an author who she wants me to help with her cover design, and she said, oh, I really like this idea, and I was like, that book was published in the 80s, and yes, it's a great book, but that's not what's selling in fantasy right now. And if you try to do that for your high fantasy cover, you're not going to get sales because it looks like an old book. And it took me sending her a billion links on Amazon and Smashwords and Barnes & Noble to convince her that that maybe wasn't the route she wanted to go. Another thing you want to pay attention to is not getting too stuck on what you want, which is something that I've really struggled with, because you know, part of the reason we're indie authors, it's not because we couldn't get traditionally published, right? It's because we wanted more control. And so we have this perspective of, I want it exactly the way I want it, but you need to keep in mind that you want it exactly the way your readers are going to want it, because they're ultimately who you're trying to appeal to. Because if we just wanted to write books the way we wanted to write books and hang everybody else, why would we ever publish? That would just be for us in our journals at home and not share with anybody else. So you need to keep that in mind as well.
Okay, aspects of the book cover itself. Font size compared to the picture size, actual title size compared to your name size. What's a good rounding size of everything in order to be balanced or in order to be unbalanced, depending on how you want your book cover to see?
I'm going to jump in on this one. There's a couple of things you want to consider. Is first of all, if you're doing fonts as an image, I know a lot of covers out there in the past have used like a really fancy font, which is almost artwork in its own right, or a logo to support a series. And it's one of those things where you end up picking a theme, at which point you want all your fonts and everything to match. And I always think that one of the things you want to look at, if I can work out how to do this, is I've got a couple of shots here that I did, and if I can figure out how to bring this up for you, I did a little bit of work on my own, trying to bring in some ideas. So this was one I started. That was my first image. Completely and utterly failed because I had two logos. One was for my name and one was for the series and book title. And my personal opinion is that they took a little bit too much space. I switched to another one a little later and came up with that idea, which was a little bit clearer for my work. But this is what I ended up with, having talked to a cover designer, and this is the one that for me actually ended up working really well, was completely and utterly away from everything I'd even thought about putting together as part of my system. I hadn't even considered those, and I don't know if I'm still sharing the pictures or not here. So, as you can see, my ideas went from a logo for my name and book title to actually just going straight text and using 3 different font sizes, one for the title, one for the subtitle for the series, and then a third one for my author name, which I made deliberately smaller because it's not the author name of a new author that's going to sell the book.
All right. I know you guys have series. Some of you have series, some of you don't. I've read Rebecca's series. I've read one of Heidi's books. Joshua, I haven't read your books yet, but I've seen some of your book covers that are in series. This is a question from Marnie C. Thank you, and she's asking this question through YouTube. For those of you with series, do you feel that you have to maintain the same theme, or do you pick the cover that represents that specific book?
It depends on my series, honestly. So, Elements of a Broken Mind and The Hunter, and Angel's Dance are both books in the same series, but they don't look similar. They're not using the same font or anything. But it's a series that can be read as standalones, and so it's not linked to each other. The Hell School series, they're all going to be on the brick background and have similar fonts, but have a different main image here in the center for each piece because the series has to be read in sequential order. That's my crazy logic, but not everybody follows that. So
I think that's perfect logic.
Yeah, I think any series has to have some kind of unifying feature, even if it's just if it's a font or a logo of some description that carries across the covers.
Yeah, I think that mine's probably a mix of the two of them. I have my first one in my series, Melchorca, and as you can see, it's got the 3 lines right across the middle of it, and I use similar fonts on it as I do as the second one, which is a little bit fancier, Dine Dare, but I also do the same thing with the 3 claws through the cover on it. And I have another book that's in the same saga, even though it's not part of that series, and it's a little faint, but it's also got 3 claw marks that are behind the dragons that you can see that kind of ties them all together. But with all of these, we use same fonts, we use the same design with where the author name is placed, where the title is placed, having a central image for them. And so I think you want to have something on the cover that speaks to what is in that, because as don't remember who said it earlier, I want to say it was Tim, the cover of the book should sell what's inside of the book when somebody's going to pick it up, otherwise they're going to be regretting picking it up to begin with. But at the same time, I think you want to be able to tie your books together in some way.
And let me just go ahead and show you my book real quick. This is Memories, and as you can see here, and with Brotherhood, the color change is different. The city background is the same, but you can also see that it's just a slightly different change with having the flower in there. This is a complete difference from when the original book cover was, which was more natural, but it did not match the series. So when you get into your book covers, the second part of her question was, do you pick covers that represent a specific book? As you chose this cover for the series and you straight through 1, 2, 3, 4, does it represent that specific genre of your book, or does it represent your story?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if a book cover doesn't represent the story, then it's kind of like dating a blonde and finding out she's not really blonde, and it costs a lot of money to maintain it. So, you know.
Where's the line? And I know I'm poking at a little bit here, but where's the line between what it represents in your book and what it represents in your series?
Well, the book should represent your series.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it should be representative of both, I would think. Also,
yeah, I think there should be a subtle piece that fits for both, just like Josh showed. You know, it doesn't have to, I mean, you don't want the exact same cover because that would be weird, and who would be able to tell which one's their favorite? Because I'm a very visual person, and I remember covers more than I remember titles. I'd be like, oh, it's that really great book with that chick that's walking down the stairs. Yeah, that's just me. But people do connect. That's why we don't. That's why we have cover art, and that's why it's become more popular as people have become more visual. You know, books back in the 1800s, a lot of them didn't have cover art. They had fancy letters and words.
Something. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Something else. If you're doing series for and thinking about your book covers, you need to think down the road too. You know, are you going to sell that as a complete set later? Or are you going to sell it as a box set? If so, you want one image that will convey across all of them later. So, you know, that's something to keep in mind. Obviously, that works better with ebooks than with printed books, though.
Well, it can do it with printed books as well. One of the elements you've got to look at on a book cover is actually the staging. If you're going to be potentially selling as a set later, and you know ahead of time that you're going to have 6 books, you can actually pick an image that will carry across the spine of all those books, and actually have that line up as part of the picture. I've seen that done very successfully with DVD sets and very successfully with book collections in the past, and it actually looks really spectacular on a shelf. But it's one of those things, unfortunately, works best with hardback covers.
I think that's also pretty cool to do, but as we were talking earlier, when you go back and you redo your book covers to kind of fit the market, that's probably the time to go back and do it. Because honestly, how many of us authors go in knowing we're going to have book 2, 3, 4, 5 done, and this is the image we want across all those covers when it comes in a box set?
Yeah.
When I first got started, I was talking with other authors, and they told me from the beginning, you know, always approach this as if it's going to be part of a series, unless in your head it's, you know, this is one story and it just, you know, hard end, and you will never touch that world again. Always keep in mind that it could become part of a series, because a series of books sells for more and easier for some reason than, you know, 3 novels.
Yeah, I can actually relate to that, because I brought out it was only my second short story called Mr. Westacott's Christmas, and I had no idea. I thought it nice little story. Well, it's had a huge reaction, and I actually had some readers say, "Oh, I'd love to read more about this person's life," and that gave me the idea to do a series of books featuring this character. So I worked on a new cover with one of my designers, and we came up with the concept of having snapshots or the old Polaroid pics as part of the cover, as though the character is recalling things from his memory, from you know, like his holidays and things like that. And that was the unifying thing. And as Heidi said, you know, never say never when it comes to a cover. I had no idea I was going to start a series of books with this character, and there you go. So yeah, I had to think in terms of where is the whole series going to go? What's going to be the overriding feel and sort of visual reference for that whole series? And I hadn't even thought about that. So yeah, it's a really good point to remind you to keep that in.
Okay. So we have the series art. We have this stuff here. We know that we're visual people, and we know that when we look at a book cover, that the book cover needs to be something that's going to catch our eye. How many layers do you view your book cover when you get it designed, or when you design your own? When you start, for example, when I design my book covers, I design my book covers as if I'm looking at it inside a box, where I have the back layer, the mid layers, and the front layer. The front layer always being the title and my name. And as you go back, you can actually disseminate. And I think the last book cover that I did, which is the one that you saw called Brotherhood, that had 15 layers, including filters and including the pictures and stuff like that. When you get your book covers, how do you go about designing what layers are going to go into it?
I only do 3 to 4. I mean, once again, I design my own, so that's basically the limit of my abilities. So that's how I decide.
My layers depend on how many images are needed in it, and then yeah, I do use Pixlr to add some nice gradient. This one only has 2 layers. Well, and then the title, of course, is a 3rd layer, but this one actually has 16 different layers on it. And so, being able to, it just depends on what you need in the image and how you need it to work. I think I don't usually think about how many layers I'm going to have when I'm designing. I'm thinking about how do I want it to look, and then however many layers it takes to get that is what it is.
Anyone else?
I think when I was talking to my cover designer for Under a Hunter's Moon, she used 4 different layers to produce the effect, because she overlaid 2 or 3 pictures and then put in some extra effects over the top. And then when I got that image back, I went and added maybe 3 more for the text. So I think it comes down to what everyone's been saying. It really does depend on the complexity of what you want, how much detail you have, and where you can pick your picture elements from. If you have to piece the picture together from multiple elements, you're just adding layers and layers all the time, and anytime you have to apply a gradient or anything to that particular layer, you've got to make sure that whatever you do, you're going to match it up with everything you've done on previous. Otherwise, you're going to lose a lot of the finer detail. Plus, it's going to suddenly jar as a very, very different element to the picture.
Okay. Let's get back into hiring somebody who's going to do a book cover for you. So you decided on your budget. What's a good budget to decide for a book cover? Is it as much as you can afford, or how do you go about it?
Well, it depends. Are you publishing for a profit, or are you publishing for yourself?
You're publishing for profit.
If you're publishing for a profit, you have to keep in mind that most books, and that's not indie books, this is all books, most books sell less than 1,000 copies. So after you've shelled out for the editor and for the cover art and for everything, and then you figure out your pricing and you want to keep that competitive, like I said, I only make $1 on my books, so spending more than $100, $150 on cover art, I'm never going to see a profit from that if I don't become the next Stephen King. And if I keep spending all my money like that, then how am I going to be the next Stephen King when I'm broke and can't keep publishing?
Yeah, there's so much that goes into that. When you're thinking about having maybe anywhere between 50 cents and $2 back on a book, depending on how you have it priced, you really have to look at what your marketing really is going to give back to you. Are you publishing just on print on demand through Amazon? Are you actually pushing your books out into independent bookstores by making those phone calls? How early on did you start marketing and getting your name out there and your book cover out there in order to get it promoted before your launch, which is typically about 3 months ahead of time is where you want to start at. It's to get that ball rolling and to be able to have, I don't know, the visibility that you want to have with it and making any progress with it, I think is just something that you really have to weigh on the scales. We know that it takes about 3 full-length novels before you start seeing any real money coming back into your pocket, which for most authors can be anywhere between 2 to 5 years. So, yeah. I don't know if that's helpful or not. I may just be repeating some of what Heidi is saying, but if you're dishing out $200 on a book cover, it could be very well 2 years before you see that $200 come back to you again.
Okay. Let's switch a little bit here away from the indie author buying book covers to there's probably some designers out there who are watching our show right now. So let's say I'm a designer and I've been practicing, and I want to sell my own book covers. Where would be a good place for me to find reputable work? Would anyone have an answer?
Goodreads?
Goodreads?
Definitely Goodreads. There's a lot of very good author groups there, and a lot of good. Well, I mean, I think most of us have probably found Goodreads at some point or another to be a big benefit in terms of making those connections. Looking out there in the chat rooms and things for the when you get familiar with people in there. I mean, I'm a prime example. I put out one book under my own name, but I've probably done several appearances now here on GoIndieNow and a few appearances on people's blogs and things. Mostly on the back of having done my own blog as part of the setup. But it's getting to know people in the forums, getting to know where they are, which groups they hang around in. I see sometimes I'm a member of about 12 different Facebook groups, for example, and each of them are specifically authors getting books out there, but they're a great place for the designers to hang around and get familiar with the authors who are there, because those are the people you're trying to market your skills to. And if you can see a market for what you can produce and see someone doing something similar and you can offer a better deal, then why would you not take advantage of that? Facebook, Goodreads, Google+, there's so many online forums and things for these people that and the skill sets. It's just ridiculous these days. But the thing is going to be, get to know the people before you actually offer them work.
Yep, and those people talk. I'm part of those groups too, and I many times see members come through and they say, hey, what do you think about this publishing company? They just offered me a contract. Or, hey, what do you think of this graphic designer? They're offering to do my book cover. And there's going to be somebody in there who knows somebody who knows somebody, and you're going to get some information on how reputable they are.
Yeah, definitely. I think we mentioned earlier, if you're an artist, you should be on DeviantArt. If you're a graphic designer, you should be on Fiverr. A lot of people
I think we have a little bit of lag here.
$8,000 custom work too. And so having your place or having yourself set up in places like that where somebody who is looking for a cover artist or a graphic designer will be able to find you is a great way to get yourself out there as well.
I was just going to say too, there's also viewers might not know that there's something called the 20/80 rule, and that's basically if 20 people like your work or product, they'll tell 80 other people variously, and that's a great way. If you're a designer and you can offer someone, say a writer, you come across a group of writers, whatever, and say, hey, I'm just starting out, I'm offering a discount on my design work or whatever, then you're going to say, as an author, wow, this design was so great, look, I'll promote you, and of course you obviously give them a mention or a link in your actual ebook. So I think that's all great ways for designers to sort of get get to know authors too.
Right. We missed what Heidi said because she lagged out a bit. Can you repeat what you said, Heidi?
About them being on graphic
Yeah.
designers should be on Fiverr, because Fiverr is a great resource, and most of the prices don't start at $5. And then for those that are doing just art, focusing on DeviantArt, those are both big sites for graphic artists, and that's where authors are going to go when they first get started looking for images.
Now, I kind of wanted, the way I asked the question was I was setting you up, and I set you up for this next question. Yes, I'm a dick that way. Basically, so that's where we're gonna go find a new designer, and designers through groups, through readers on Goodreads, and you get all this information. As published authors, how willing are you to try a no-name first-time book designer for the book cover?
Depends on if they've got samples. One of the top designers that I'm looking at working with, she's only been on Fiverr since June, which is a very short time. She only has 10 reviews. They're all excellent reviews, but I don't know who they're from. But she's got a huge gallery, and I can see from her artwork the quality of work that she can do and the skill level that she has. So, it's just like with authors. We're not going to sell a lot with our first book, but when we've got 5 or 6 or 7 books out there, that's where we make our money, because people have a chance to see what we can do. So it's the same thing with creative designers. If you're looking to get yourself out there, have a website. Get your art up on DeviantArt. Get your art up on Fiverr. And the more that you have out there for people to be able to see, the more likely they are to hire you, even if you've never had a client yet. Having that visibility is great.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. I mean, it's similar to how I approached my books. I got out some short stories. People got samples of it. I got told people wanted more. Well, the first thing that's going to happen is I'm going to write more. It's coming back to the same thing. You can't sell off the back of one thing. You've got to keep producing. And I've seen so much amazing work on DeviantArt that people have offered up at stupidly good prices because they're new in the business and they're building a name for themselves. It was only a pity that I didn't find anything that matched what I wanted. Otherwise, I would have gone with someone who was completely and utterly new to the business. I'm a great believer in giving people a step up. It's one of the reasons why my blog works the way it does. There's a lot of people out there who come through me with their first time book, have got a little bit of exposure on there and done really well. And there's people who've gone off and disappeared into the sunset because they didn't follow it up. But you've got to make that commitment, get the work out there and be spotted. If you don't, then people aren't going to hire you.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about font choices. Per genre, we have romance writers here, we have fantasy writers here, we have writers in, I think, the top genres here. Which font choice is the best for your genre that you write in? Do you have a specific one? Do you have one that you don't like? What are your font choices?
I think Josh mentioned it earlier. Never is there a good reason to use Comic Sans. Never. Never. If you're making a picture to go in a third grader's classroom, maybe. But that's about it. Other than that, I tend to look at what's hot. And I like different fonts. I like curly fancy fonts, but a lot of times that's not what's popular. So you're best served if you look at what's popular with the top bestsellers at the time and go with that, or something similar.
And many times it's got to be something that's just easy to read, very clear, definite on the cover, and it's something that you can pick up from a distance. I think the rule is like 5 feet away you should be able to read the title. You should be able to also see the title on the spine from 5 feet away. And you don't want, like I said earlier, just stick it to about 2 fonts on the cover. You don't usually want to go more than that. Just something very clear and definite. I know it doesn't sound real cool to use things like Times New Roman or Arial or whatever, but it's clear. It's easy to read.
Yeah, and for ebooks, if you can't read it in a thumbnail, don't use it.
Definitely. And for what it's worth, there's a lot of other really great fonts besides Times New Roman and Arial that are readable.
Yes.
So, you just take some time and explore. But the big thing is look for readability, not for fancy.
Also, too, I think sometimes I write horror, and I think some fonts have actually become a bit cliche, like the Droopy Blood font that is so overused that I refuse to use that now, and I will find something similar, but something that's not going to have people go, oh, dear. So, yeah, I think try and avoid cliched fonts, like Shatter and things like that, because I think they've just become a little bit overworked by other media and also with books, and I think that can make you a bit lost in the crowd.
Well, let's go. Let's talk about that point right there. Lost in the crowd. Both Rebecca and Heidi have been talking about. Look at what's selling. Look at what's popular now. And in a way, are you promoting to join the group of what's popular now, or stick out?
Well, you don't want to copy it exactly, but you still want to stick within what appeals to that audience. For example, my friend who wanted me to do her fantasy book, she wanted to use the old style super curly Q font that's really popular in the 80s. Yeah, see, I see some head shaking, yeah. And I was like, yeah, I love that font. It's gorgeous. It's adorable. It brings me back to my childhood. But modern fantasy they're leaning more towards almost a sci-fi style of font, bigger, blockier letters. And so if you go and put a fantasy out there that has that curly Q font style, it's going to be dated. Do you have to use big block sci-fi looking letters? No, but find maybe a curlier font that has a sci-fi feel, or find a nice blending that will be enough that it will be appealing to the modern audience while still giving it your own unique. You don't want to do the exact same font everybody else is doing. Definitely not.
Rebecca?
Agreed. I mean, you can conform a little and still be unique. A snowflake looks like a snowflake until you get close enough. And then you can see the differences. And I think, the same thing should go for covers. It should look like it belongs there, but still stand out.
Gentlemen?
Yeah. When I did the Under 100 Moon cover, I went with the Dolka. It's a little different to some of the regular fonts. It's clear, it's blocky, yes, but it stands out really well from a distance. It's bold enough that it actually reads well on a cover, especially with the right colors against the background. And more than anything else, it's something I hadn't seen a lot of, because it's got those thick slopes on one side and the thinner slopes on the other, which actually reminiscent of the some of the older fonts. And when you're talking about an urban fantasy, having some ties back that shows you've got some recognition of the history can actually be a very good thing.
That's a good point, Timothy, that if you want to have that nostalgia, I just started watching Stranger Things, which I know but font-wise. Have any of you guys watched Stranger Things? Okay, so it takes place in the 80s.
I haven't watched it yet, no spoilers.
No, I'm not going to tell the story. It takes place in the 80s, and the font looks like every 80s sci-fi movie ever made, ever. And it immediately takes you into the right positioning and mindset that they're looking for. Obviously, they had an older audience in mind when they made the show. So you can use font that way, and then in that case, you wouldn't want to stick to what's big on the top Amazon listings. But you want to be intentional with your font if you're going to do that, to find that as a way to set yourself apart from the others.
Yeah, and another reason I went into doing that was very simple, because there's a history of nostalgia in the story, because it starts in one time period and goes back a few years and comes back forward again. So I wanted kind of that visual tie into that element.
Yeah, I think these pieces about font are really important, but honestly for me, I know when I go to pick up a book, it's really the color combination that draws me in more. And I know that I keep seeing Heidi's book there in the back of the one that she's done with the red on the white, And it's that type of color, it's that dynamic that pulls me in. And again, there's many times that I see covers that just have really bizarre colors that they're trying to blend together and don't necessarily work, and you have to be very careful about what you choose for your cover that's going to be visually appealing to your reader.
Let me go ahead and talk a little bit about this point here. When I was redesigning my book covers for my fantasy, my urban fantasy, something that people might find interesting is that I was talking with Angela B. Chrysler, and she helped me redesign my book covers by telling me which way to go. And that colored point right there that Joshua pointed is very, very important. Apparently tests have been done and which book covers appeal to which people. Softer shades of blue and grays appeal more to women, while the reds and the oranges appeal more to men in fantasy. And that's why my second book cover, which is more towards men, is more orange and red, outstanding. And Heidi has something to say.
I guess I'm a man. Sorry. No, yeah, I mean, you want to stick with the general idea of who your audience is, but you do want to keep in mind that there are outliers. My color schemes aren't so much based on the genres as they are me. That's why I'm an indie publisher, because my books they don't fit neatly into niches that the traditional publishers want, and the color schemes don't fit into those niches either. So you do want to be careful with that, but certainly look for a color scheme that appeals for sure.
And that's why I was saying to look at the bestsellers list, because for the mass media books, they have people who are currently doing those tests to see what sells, what colors to use. That's why you mimic them. That way you know what is hot right now in your genre.
Okay. How do you keep it from being in the 90s? For example, when I was in the 90s, and I don't mean like being dated, but I mean when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, every romance book cover had Fabio. He was everywhere. The hair, the chest, he was everywhere. How do you keep from falling into that trap?
Well, at the time, you wouldn't. I mean, those were the covers. Now, now none of the Fabio stuff works because Fabio made such an ass of himself, to be honest. No one wants to go down that route again.
Yeah, but you get the same... Sorry, go ahead, Heidi.
I was going to say, a perfect example, when I was looking for cover art or when I was looking to redesign my Hunter series, I went and looked at what was popular. Every single cover has facial images, people that are in a dark, foggy background. So I went, okay, so I need to have people on my cover, because I was debating whether to do something like that or whether to do something that was more symbolic. And I was like, okay, no, popular thing is I got to have people on the cover. But I don't have to have fog. Or if I'm going to have fog, I'm at least going to have the trees in the background so it makes sense. You don't have to make it exactly the way everything else is. But like when I was doing the cover for Hell School, it's a young adult series. And everybody's like, oh yeah, you have to have covers with people on them for the young adult series. And I went and looked at the literary series for young adults, and almost none of them had covers on it. It had something that was referencing school and then something symbolic to do with the book. And that's why I went that route. And it's funny because I've had some of my marketers, they're like, are you sure you don't want to change the cover? And I was like, well, unless you can guarantee me 900 sales in the first 3 months, no, I don't want to change my cover because I think my cover's doing pretty darn well. And, yeah.
That's actually what I found too, which personally, I don't really care for people on the front cover, usually.
Yeah, I don't either.
Usually I like images and other things like that, but I know with my latest one, we did the person with the foggy-like background, and it sells really well. I mean, people are drawn into it because there's a person on it, and it works better. But just one more point on colors and talking about that, and I could be wrong on this. It's been a little while since I've looked into it, but you usually don't want to go more than 2 or 3 colors on the cover. You want to have a pretty dynamic contrast in the cover done with just about 2 or 3 colors that you're using. You don't want to have, rainbows across your book, unless it's in that genre.
It depends on the genre for sure. But generally speaking, yeah, you don't want to overwhelm them. You want one thing that focuses the color.
That's one of the reasons I did this with this one. I actually went with the cityscape because it's set in Seattle. It was very clearly marked the territory of the book, and the colours actually come out from the picture itself that was used as a backdrop. But then I kept the colours around that very plain and simple to draw the eye back to them rather than the image itself.
Yeah, being a horror author, and I've looked at Amazon bestsellers and so forth, and sometimes they don't even have an image, you know, just some abstract art. But with my first collection, Portraits of Dread, I definitely wanted the Grim Reaper, so people could see straight away, wow, yeah, that's horror. And having the background set in a mausoleum, I just thought added to it. So I think if you can add an image and mix it like Josh said, have it keep your colours basic without blinding your reader, you're going to have more success at them sort of saying, aha, that's the sort of book I'm looking for. Yep, I think I'll check this out a bit more.
Okay. So you're trying to be an individual without leaving the group. What do you do when everybody has that ideal book cover of, well, you got to show somebody, they got to be attractive, they got to be sexy, they got to be in a sexy pose, even if it's fantasy. And right now I have this book site that makes book covers open on my site here, and they have some simple covers. Yes, they have the fog in the background, they have the man or the woman standing in the shadow, but then you get into some of them and it's supposed to be a fantasy book, but you have two people in a bed, looks like they're about to have sex. You know, what happens?
There is fantasy like that, sweetheart.
Well, I don't mean there's not fantasy like that, but when you're trying to, as a fresh author, trying to decide, I'm going to fantasy, and you see covers like this, do you want to say, well, there's covers like this, so go ahead and you need someone having sex to sell?
No.
No, is that cover telling the story inside the cover?
Well, I don't want to say the person's name, but basically,
if sex is a major part of the book, maybe. Yeah. But if sex isn't a major plot line, leave it out of the cover. Because otherwise, people are going to start writing it off as, that's just another, someone wanted to write porn and they made it a fantasy.
Yeah,
okay.
I agree with
Rebecca. Leave that alone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a particular author in the urban fantasy genre who's become very well known for writing the sex scenes into her stories, but the covers don't reflect that particularly well. And it's what you want to say, like Josh says. Does it tell the story? Does it tell the story inside the cover, or does it try to just push an aspect that people are likely to pick the book up for, and then completely lie to you about what's actually inside?
Now let's talk about that right there. What's inside the book appearing on the book cover itself. How much of your story do you put into that first image that they see?
It's just a snapshot image, really. I mean, if you try to do too much, it gets too cluttered. Like with the hunters, my new cover that I'm doing, I'm going to have the two main hunters back to back fighting in an area where they're surrounded by trees. And so you don't see the vampires, but you know that they're fighting because they're all decked out to fight. There's lots of other stuff that happens in the story, but they're vampire hunters, so yeah, they're fighting. So you want to pick that iconic snapshot moment of the book. This is what matters about the story, unless you're going with something more symbolic. So.
Yeah, I think Heidi's right too. It's like almost like we're trying to create a movie trailer with one still image, so that the readers can get a good, well, a good general idea of what the book is about. And we need that cover that's going to do that. Now, we've all got stories and books with many, many great scenes, and so it's hard for us to basically narrow it down. But like Heidi just described, her next cover, and that's brilliant because it's part of a story. But there's undoubtedly heaps more scenes she's got in there that she could have gone with. Yeah.
I absolutely agree. I don't know what else I can add to that, and I know that we don't all want to agree with each other on a panel, but it's pretty industry standard. You want that cover to really draw the reader in. You want that back blurb to give them a little slice of pie to make them want to open up the book and read those first few pages. And at any point that you mislead them on any one of those three spots, you've really just ruined your reputation as an author. You're going to be very lucky getting another book published unless you're doing it underneath a pen name and starting all over again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that book, that front cover and everything goes around it, that's a promise you're making to your readers. One of the things I tried to avoid with Under a Hunter's Moon, I really, really, in my early drafts of the cover, wanted to put the character in the image. And I looked at a few ways of doing that, and there wasn't anything that didn't look chintzy. Because I wanted the elements of the moon, I wanted the elements of the city, but I also wanted to put the character in there. In the end, I decided it was more important to go with the symbolism and reduced it down to the two elements of the moon and the city, which really gives a feel for what's coming up later on in the series, I think.
Okay. We just got a question in right now. How much does a cover matter in your branding? And do we think we should think about using that to help brand us? So how much is your cover branding you? And how much does it matter to your particular brand?
I think it matters a lot.
Yeah, look at Game of Thrones.
Yeah, it's one of the major things. The first thing they see, there's your image, and then there's your name on the image. That is your brand.
Well, some of you...
Interesting. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'll let you speak. Some of you write more than one genre, so how does that... you're branding yourself, so how does that work?
Perfect question. So I just saw, I wish I could remember her name right now. She's a big YA author, published by Penguin. And her, there's a paranormal fantasy and an urban fantasy, which is why I'm looking at updating my website, so I'm checking out the competition, and I love the way her cover or her website is designed, because each page has a different image, which when you look at it is a piece of the cover of one of the books from that series. And so she absolutely has totally incorporated, and she does a whitewash, so it's not too distracting from trying to read the page, but she absolutely uses that, and that's part of why I wanted to redo the cover for the Hunters with the Hunted coming out and have those images to put up on my website that would be that nice compelling background that she has on each of those pages. So yeah, I think it's a very important piece to consider. And when you do write across multiple genres, keeping in mind that it's a juggling act that you have to balance. And that's part of why traditionally published authors were encouraged to write under pen names if they switched between genres.
So we have that. Your brand. You when you were designing your first book cover, were you even thinking about branding, or were you just thinking about your book?
Please, I was just thinking about publishing my book. And that's sad, because I'm trained in marketing. I should have been thinking ahead, but I was just so excited to be publishing my book. I didn't think about any of that.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier, and kudos to Rebecca for thinking ahead like that, but most of the time when you're coming out and getting your first book out there, you're so giddy with glee that you just want to get it out there. The idea of branding and marketing sometimes comes second.
I actually came about it the other way around. I have no marketing background, but I come out from a retail background, and I've been around books my entire life, so I've seen a lot of what authors have been doing to get themselves recognized, especially on what I was looking at was textbooks a lot of the time. And you'll find a lot of textbooks coming out from the same companies or in the same series by the same company will have a particular look to them. That is very definitely branding. Sometimes it's only as simple as headings and everything in the same places in the same fonts, like Josh was talking about earlier, keeping things something consistent for the author or for the series. And I think that's very definitely a big part of branding. You are branding yourself, but you're not just branding yourself. If you're writing multiple books in the same series, keeping a consistent brand across everything, we have to be, spot on right there, right from the start. And I think it's very important to make that distinction from the beginning. And sorry, Heidi, but you came from that background. You should have known better.
All right, we're gonna be closing it. We're gonna be closing it in a little bit here, with about 2 or 3 more questions that I have lined up here. Just some simple things here that I want to say before we get to the last couple of questions. This will be the last GoIndieNow panel discussion that we do on Hangouts, not by our choice, but by Google's choice of ending Hangouts application. The next thing is very early. Heidi mentioned something about extended licensing, and I looked up some little quick research here, and this is how little research it takes. If you're gonna do a stock image, you're allowed 500,000 media copies. That's it. If you're planning on having more than 500,000 copies of it, you need to get the extended license on it for printed. So that's a little bit of research finds you that much right there.
Yeah, and do keep in mind that's not just printed copies.
Yeah.
That's
it's
if you're using it for your ebook sales and all of your marketing.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely want to keep that in mind when you're looking, because every time you do any piece of marketing that goes out there with your book cover on it, that counts as one of those images. A lot of authors don't get that extended license, and most of them they're okay, because unless they're making enough money, they're not going to be bothered with it. But you want to have yourself covered, because do any of us really not hope that we're going to not be the next Stephen King? Plan ahead.
Yeah.
That's true. Now here the video that we're going to be doing out when we get to the next part here for the next panel discussion, the video will be done through YouTube as well, but we'll figure that out, and that'll come out for everyone next. Some other information here. Yeah, the cover design for print books, you can find them almost everywhere. CreateSpace has them. You can find them out on panels. You can even do a search for cover design templates. One thing that you must remember if you're doing a paperback template, you must have a place for the ISBN barcode number. So count that as part of your book design. Programs that are out there that we mentioned today, Photoshop, GIMP. I personally use GIMP because it allows you to do so much effort. Some parts that allow you, and it's free. Free is very useful. Where I get my fonts is called cooltext.com, and it has tons and tons and millions of fonts and stuff like that. Timothy just mentioned Canva, which leads to the next question. Each one of you, please go ahead and tell me if you know. If you don't know, you don't know. Where do you get your fonts? What program do you use to build it? And where do you get your artwork?
I have a lot of different resources. 1,000 Fonts is one of my favorite font sites, but a lot of times I'll just search fonts and go through several different ones. But I typically start with 1,000 Fonts. For cover art, I have a membership to Graphic Stock. I'm also a member of iStock Photo. I like looking on Pixabay, DeviantArt, and I just started looking on Fiverr for custom jobs.
I use Canva a lot for my design work. So basically, the fonts there are the ones I'm limited to, but they have got such a good selection of fonts that I think for pretty much most people's purposes, unless you want a really, really artistic font style, like I see there on Angel's Dance, sit there with Heidi. I think it's very, very possible to do it with just no expense.
Yeah, I use Cool Text too, which is great for if you're doing any sort of media, whatever. You can actually design a logo and so forth. I don't use that on covers, obviously, but they have a great selection of fonts. Also, 1,000 fonts, which is great, and it's all divided into families, which makes it easier to find, like calligraphy fonts, graffiti fonts, whatever. For images, there's Flickr, there's Upsplash. There is a whole range where you can actually sign up for a newsletter, and also they will send you free images for you to use in a and it could be anything, landscapes, whatever. But it's great to keep and use as a free resource. We love free.
Death to Stock Photo is one of those that sends out those email newsletters, and I have a whole piece of the cloud devoted just to Death to Stock Photos. They've got some great stuff.
Joshua, Rebecca?
I actually don't have a good answer for you. Luckily, I have somebody that takes care of those things for me. So, I mean, we discuss them from time to time, but I let her essentially per use things. She knows the rules and regulations around it and has her own sites and everything that she uses, and not something that I have to have my hands in.
Okay.
I use the stock photos. There's a couple. There are plenty of websites where you can get, stock photos, historical photos, pictures for free with the licenses needed. I spent the first 3 months, like I said, stockpiling those photos. So I haven't really looked at it in that long because I've got a folder with like 500 images now. So I was looking it up again, and let's see. Yeah, all of them. It's been so long, most of them are gone by now.
Mm.
All the stuff I have now is stuff like Fiverr and cover websites. So, and I get all of my fonts through the GIMP forums. They usually give me a good list. You ask them what, look through there to find out the type of font you want, and they'll point you in the right direction.
Good, good, good. All right. The last question we're gonna have is a very simple one, and it is: do you design a different book cover when you're looking at a paperback versus looking at the digital copy? Because the digital copy only allows you for the front of the book, but do you design a different cover completely?
I keep mine the same unless something gets, well, no, actually all of mine are the same. I've had no reason to do separate. Now, with Elements of a Broken Mind, obviously there's this lovely art on the back that isn't in the ebook, but outside of that factor, the front covers are identical. It keeps the branding linked.
Same here.
Not having done my own paperback copies at this point, it's going to be hard to tell, but I have plans to actually wrap around portions of the cover from the front to the back, because the image I'm using for the front cover is much wider, and then using that back cover portion to carry that image around so there's something consistent from front to back.
I'm the same. I haven't put any of mine to print yet, but that is my plan. When I created these, I knew I was going to one day publish, get them printed out. So making them all ready to be extended out, or just quickly add something to the back. But the center image is going to stay the center image, so they all look the same.
Yeah, my new short horror collection, Choice Cuts, A Bite from the Dark Realm, actually has a creepy-looking butcher on the front. Now, the image needs to be wrapped around the spine, and at the back I need, with my designer, we're working on something that will keep the whole brand coming, and that may be, old style wooden tubs of pickles and things like that. So when I design or I talk with my designer about my cover, even on an ebook, I always have the paperback in mind too. So yeah, that's me.
All right. I think we're gonna go ahead and call it a nice finishing this panel discussion, and it was a great talking to everybody here. At GoIndieNow panel discussion for book covers. What I would like you to do now, we'll start again from the left with Heidi, and go ahead and talk about your book, mention your website if you have one, and do your final shout out. Heidi, go ahead.
All right, you can find me at Heidi, Heidi, Angel, ANGELL.com. And I am the author of the Clear Angel Chronicles, which is a paranormal romance series. I also have the Hunter series, which is urban fantasy, and the Hell School series, which is literary young adult fiction.
Thank you very much. Joshua?
Hey, again, I am Joshua Robertson. You can find my website at www.crimsonedgepress.com. You can also find me on Facebook in a couple of different groups. We have the Crimson Edge Book Club as well as the Phoenix Quill writing community. Great places to hang out if you're just looking for authors or other people in the writing field to connect with. I have a couple series out, but I'm most well known for the Thrice Nine Legends series with my bestseller Melkorka. And then as well, if you would like some additional writing tips, you can find my YouTube channel. Username is Robertson Writes, where I have several videos on writing tips. And then I also run my own podcast called The Writer's Edge, and we just had a video come up this week with marketing tips. It's about an hour long, but gives you some new marketing tips that you may not have heard of in other places, so feel free to go check that out and subscribe. Thanks, Jen.
No problem. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, I'm Michael J. Elliott, author of Portraits of Dread and my Halloween planned release, Choice Cuts, a Bite from the Dark Realm. I'm also a children's book illustrator. If you'd like to say g'day to me or contact me and find out about my works, I have my own author site, which is www.thirdscribe/mysticmyth.com. And I do blog series, talk about the face of horror in movies, books, so forth. Okay, you can also find me on Twitter at The Writer Bloke, which is my handle. And also I run a website called The Writers Emporium, where I encourage people to come and talk and find out about new indie authors. So if you'd like to check that out, or if you're an indie author yourself, and I'm more than happy to feature you, all free of course. Okay, and I just wanted to say g'day from down under to two friends of mine, Michael and Adam in Arizona. G'day guys, and thanks for having me, Jin.
No problem. Thank you very much, Mike. All right, Rebecca?
Yeah, once again, I'm Rebecca Jonesy. That's Rebecca Jonesy at Blogspot. You can also find me on Facebook and Twitter under that handle. Come check me out.
Tim?
I'm Timothy Bateson, author of the Shadows Under Seattle series, primarily starting with Under a Hunter's Moon, and I can be found on my blog at Timothy Bateson Author. That's TIMOTHY.BATESON author.wordpress.com, which is my blog where I support local indie authors as well as indie authors across the US and across the world by giving them spots online where they can go ahead and get some recognition and get some face time with the readers. And I'm also at timothybatesonauthor.weebly.com. That's WEEBLY.com for my sci-fi and fantasy series information and any more you want to know about me.
All right, thank you everyone for being here today. I am Gino Kubo with GoIndieNow. I love this shirt, by the way. It's one of my favorites. Too bad I only have one. Thank you everyone for joining us, and this has been Gino Kubo on book covers with GoIndieNow. Everybody will be able to see this on YouTube as well, and if you have any more questions through YouTube, I'm pretty sure that I or anyone else who sees it will probably be glad to give you an answer to your question. Just post it in the comments anytime, and that will be great. Again, this is our last one through Hangouts. The panel discussion from now on will be through YouTube directly. Thank you everyone for being here, and that's it.